Now was not the time for Zhao to ask Drunk about the situation in the Carrion Swamp. There were plenty of opportunities to ask something like that in the future, but now they had other matters to attend to. After more than 2 hours, Brick had reached the canyon. The canyon was a good location to make camp, a flat area between two mountains that had a small stream. Also, because of the flat terrain, this place made it difficult for people to hide and ambush them. But not for Zhao. Any place can become a place of ambush, since he could make his army instantly appear in a patch of the canyon. Zhao and Merin stepped out of the space and carefully looked over the canyon's terrain. They couldn't get a good look at the opposite party since there weren't any decent hiding places closer than this. This spot was their only option. Merin had a certain understanding of the battlefield. If this army was just made up of some random fighters, then with Zhao's power, they would be able to defeat them. But if this army was unified under the command of someone rich in battle experience, then exterminating them would not be so easy. Such a person would be difficult to deal with. After seeing the canyon, they returned to the space. They went to the living room in the villa to watch the screen. It was a good time, so Zhao then called Drunk to tell him what happened in the Carrion Swamp. The news that Drunk gave him disappointed Zhao a little, even though he expected it. Their job was just to explore the edge of the Carrion Swamp, so they didn't really gain any insights into the place, nor did they find any powerful undead or spirit beasts. Most importantly, they weren't able to get any plants. The area they were searching was like an enormous muddy pond that was difficult to walk in, slowing down their actions. The first layer of the Carrion Swamp was a lifeless marsh. Fortunately, the undead that came along with Drunk and the Black Midges, under Zhao's command, were born from the Carrion Swamp. The undead had been living in the swamp their entire life, to the point where they could move around by instinct. It was where they were born, grew up, died, and became endeared. The Carrion Swamp was their home. That was exactly why the Carrion Swamp was a powerful place. The spirit beasts that died there became undead creatures that was able to slowly level up. The only other place in the continent that had such capabilities was deep magic. People believed that there was a devil in deep magic that was able to bring you back to life if you had a reason to continue living after you died. It was because the Carrion Swamp was a place that constantly produced undead that made it so strong. Since the Carrion Swamp was where you could turn dead animals into undead and the fact that it has killed so many experts, it became known as a special place that was off limits. This was why Zhao told Drunk to be careful. They had to first explore the swamp to better understand it before stirring up trouble. Even though this time Drunk and the Black Midges didn't gain anything, next time they would prepare for a more in-depth look inside the Carrion Swamp. After Drunk told Zhao everything that happened, he put the Black Midges away, then quietly sat in the living room while watching the screen. But Merin noticed that Zhao simply wasn't paying attention to what was happening on the screen, and was probably thinking over Drunk's words. Master, although Drunk didn't gain anything, at least they didn't suffer any losses. It's good enough that they survived the Carrion Swamp. There is a reason why it's worthy of being one of the 5 forbidden areas in the continent. No, I don't blame Drunk and the other Black Midges. They did a good job, Zhao said. I was just thinking of how big of a threat the Carrion Swamp is. If we want to create farmland and raise animals in the Black Waste, I would prefer if we could find some way to get rid of it. Merin frowned. That is impossible. After so many years, no one has ever conquered the Carrion Swamp. That doesn't mean that we can't try. No one has ever really tried to conquer the Carrion Swamp because they didn't live near it like we do, so we have to try. Merin understood what Zhao meant. The reason why no one has been able to conquer the Carrion Swamp was because, first, it was too dangerous, and second, no one lived near it. It wasn't like the Carrion Swamp would ever be a threat to them. They didn't have to suffer through any painful experiences from it. But the Buda clan was different. If they couldn't handle the Carrion Swamp, then the Buda clan would never develop. Armies of undead spirit beasts could just rush out of the Carrion Swamp, destroying everything in their path until there was nothing. It was the greatest threat to the Buda clan. Blockhead and Rockhead had been quietly listening to what Zhao said. At one point, Blockhead couldn't help but say, "Master, the Carrion Swamp is a big threat, but as long as we have the space, we will be safe. It's too dangerous to go to the Carrion Swamp. If we die, it doesn't matter. But if Master dies, we wouldn't be able to face our clan's ancestors. You have to be careful." Blockhead's tone was heavy. When she heard what he said, Marin's face changed. Recently, because of Zhao's various fantastic accomplishments, she no longer worried about Zhao's safety. But Blockhead's words reminded her that Zhao was the last child of the Buda clan. If anything were to happen to Zhao, then the Buda clan would no longer exist. Zhao looked at Blockhead, and he couldn't help but give a wry smile. "You think that I'm messing with the Carrion Swamp because I want to? The space won't protect us forever. Remember that I drank the water of nothingness. I can't learn magic or martial arts, and my body is weaker than the average person. If one day I were to get sick and die, or become old and die, do you think that the space will continue to exist? Once the space is gone, what else do you think the Buda clan has that can resist the Carrion Swamp?" From Zhao's words, everyone's face turned white. Zhao waved his hand and continued, "The water of nothingness doesn't just affect me. My descendants up to 12 generations would also be unable to learn magic or martial arts. Once I am gone, I fear that it would be impossible for the Buda clan to stop any spirit beast attacks. We need to resolve our situation with the Carrion Swamp once and for all." Marin opened her mouth. She wanted to say something, but in the end she didn't say anything. What Zhao said was true. Zhao's amazing magical space was something the Buda clan depended on. If one day it was really gone, then they would be finished. In Zhao's eyes, he wanted the Buda clan to endure for generations, so they had to address the threat of the Carrion Swamp.